The session name is Exploring Cultures, very difficult, very similar, and we have Sibyl here to speak.
All right. So, thank you. Somebody's here. It would be so boring if I had to speak to the room that was totally empty. So, I want to first start off with a story. Around 1998, I said to my husband that I wanted to take a trip to Greece. And my husband is one that's usually pretty agreeable on just about any idea that I would pose to him. And so I said to my mom, hey, let's go to Greece. And she goes, yeah, that's a great idea. And I thought, wow, I should ask my cousin. And so I asked my cousin, Rita, would you like to go to Greece? I'm going with my mom. She goes, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to ask my sister. She has a twin sister, Rhoda. So now Rhoda is going. I'm thinking, this is so great. So now my sister and my mom, we're all going. This is like a family trip to Greece. I've never been to Greece before. And I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I'm like, yeah, my mom and I are going to Greece with my cousin. She goes, oh, I've never been to Greece. I want to go to Greece. So great. So she's going to go to Greece. And she said, I'm going to bring my daughter. So I was already bringing my 10-month-old daughter, which I thought was really nice that my mom, my daughter, and myself would go to Greece, like a little bonding. But now my cousins are going. And now this other woman is going, my coworker with her daughter. So now we have all of these adults going, and me, and a 10-month-old. Didn't sound so exciting anymore. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to manage this 10-month-old? Because now I'm going to go on tours. We've booked all these different tours. How am I going to do this with the 10-month-old? If it's just my mom, then she doesn't mind. She can stop with me. We can change diapers. We can mix formula. But now I have all these other adults who are not going to be excited that I have to keep stopping. And then I start looking at all the tours and how am I going to push the stroller, how I'm going to carry this baby. So I say to my husband, I don't think I should take Danielle, my 10-month-old baby, and my firstborn child after 4 years of marriage. So this is like the golden child. He said, well, what would you do with her? I said, I'll leave her home with you. So you would leave your child at home to go on a vacation? What kind of mother does that? A mother who wants to go on a vacation and have a good time. That's the kind of mother who does that. And that's when I realized the difference in culture between me as an American and my Nigerian husband. Because for him, every move I make belongs with that child because I'm the mother. And my understanding was this child belonged to both of us. And sometimes I would take care of her, and sometimes you would take care of her. And all the time, we would take care of her. And so when we think about culture, what do we really think about? You know, so what's your definition? So I'm going to just kind of throw it out to everybody. What's your definition of culture? Anyone?
Conglomerates, a whole combination of mindsets, of the history, of the language, of the arts, of everything combined.
Okay.
That's what forms culture.
Yeah. Mindsets, language, history. Anyone else want to add to that? Mm-hmm.
Traditions and beliefs.
Traditions and belief. Right?
Even perceptions.
Perceptions. So how we were brought up and everything that shaped. And so my Nigerian husband actually has an American passport. So he feels very American. He tells us in our household that he is the only American. And the rest of us are really Nigerians because we like Nigeria better than America. So as much as he likes to believe that he's an American, he probably is more American than the rest of us now because his culture now has become more American than the rest of us, and we've all become more Nigerian. So we've kind of like done some cultural switching. And so yes, culture is definitely mindset, language, traditions. and it's also basically how we solve our problems. Our culture really impacts how we're going to say yes to a problem, say no to a problem, or how we're going to manage that problem. It's really influenced by all the things that we grew up, which was in the situation I gave you for my 10-month-old daughter. So when we're about to travel, my husband's solution is, his culture tells him the child belongs with the mother. My culture tells me my child needs to be someplace where it's convenient, wherever that would be. And at this particular point, it wasn't with me. So I'll give you a little more to end that story. So the day of the trip, so my husband just kept saying that there's no way that I should go without this child. And I thought, okay, you know what? I had made arrangements to ask a friend, could she stay with her? And she said yes. And so when I now said, hey, I even got arrangements for her. And he goes, what does that mean? I said, she can stay with my particular friend, Kamisa. And he goes, you would really leave your child with someone else for an entire week just so you can go on a holiday? I mean, it was just so unbelievable for him because his culture tells him that that's not how things are done with mothers. And when I saw that, he just thought it was so strange, I just figured, let me just take the child. But to end the story, the day of the trip, I bundled up my 10-month-old. We put on our clothes to go to the airport. He saw me with these bags and he asked me, what is that? I said, that's her formula. This is water. We don't know what the water is going to be like. This is the formula and the water, the Pampers, the wipes, all the things that you need to take, the food, and several other kinds of food because I don't know if she'll be able to get food. He looked at it and goes, just leave her here. Just leave her here. So, you know, he broke culture at that particular point. But the question is, why is culture so important? Why is culture so important for us? Why do we need to understand other people's culture? And we see now that this is becoming a global world. We see that every one of us are talking and interchanging, and we can't even be able to sometimes tell what comes from what country. So how many of us eat pizza? Right? But is pizza our natural food? Right? But we eat pizza almost like a go-to snack, as if we, you know, so now we don't even know sometimes what belongs to what. So growing up in New York City, I ate knish. I had no idea until I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, that knish belonged to the Jewish community. And therefore, there was no knish in Atlanta, Georgia. Because where was the Jewish community? So tiny that they weren't as relevant. And so we begin to see that culture is starting to touch, you know, where we get to meet other people from different cultures. And so if we don't look at people through an eye, if we look at people through the eyes of their culture, we can understand them a lot better. So if I was able to look at my husband through the eyes of his culture and understanding that he wasn't trying to imprison this child to me, but from his perspective, that children belong to the mom. And therefore, why would I want to go on a holiday without my child? And if he looked at me from the perspective of my culture and realized that children belong to the family, and of course I don't want to take my child on a holiday, then we would probably have settled that discussion a lot earlier. So culture is very important, not only in terms of relationships, personal relationships, but how about business relationships? How about when we have business relationships and we're doing business with someone from another culture and not understanding how that culture works? So if we look at just the American culture versus the Japanese culture or the Asian culture, who are people who value relationships a lot. And not that Americans don't value relationships, but we also value getting the job done. So we're like, let's close this deal. So we're thinking we've had 2 conversations, let's sign. Whereas in the Asian culture, they're saying, no, let's talk about this some more, let's drink some more tea, let's have some more lunch. And somewhere 2 weeks later, maybe we'll start talking business. It's about building that relationship. We would now start to look at that person and think, they're moving too slow. They're not really serious. They're just stalling the deal. So these are some differences. So when we look at culture, we understand that, yeah, there's a lot of differences, but there are a lot of similarities. And so when we look at some of the similarities, we can now use those to build, but use the differences as well to build. Because we find that all over the world, and we're really doing a lot of exploration of diversity in the United States, the diversity of us bringing all of our different cultures together and putting them on the table is what strengthens organizations, is what strengthens relationships. So what do I see that culture is so important? In the workplace. If in the workplace I truly understood your perspective and why you were doing what you were doing, and how what you're doing has nothing to do sometimes with gender, but more of culture, then sometimes I wouldn't necessarily pull my gender card. So I remember being in South Africa with a client, and after the client meeting, I was with a client and we were meeting another potential client. And so after the meeting, the gentleman stood up and he said goodbye to my client and shook his hand. And he turned to me and said, "Thank you." Now, an African-American woman, you say thank you to me and you shook his hand. So the first question I had, is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm an African-American woman? Okay, is it because, so it's not natural. So but then he now said, I didn't shake your hand out of respect, not out of disrespect. I didn't shake your hand because, he was also a Muslim man, a Middle Eastern Muslim man. A Middle Eastern Muslim man who was on the very conservative side of his faith. And so his utmost way of showing respect to me was not to shake my hand. Where I was thinking, so now I'm not good enough for you to shake my hand? And so those are the things that, if we could just understand people's culture. Could you imagine if he didn't explain how I would have left that meeting? Because I was also the person who was influencing my client of, should he do business with this person or not? And I could have been like, oh, he's too rude, he doesn't respect women, all because I didn't understand culture. So let's talk about similarities in culture. So when I look at similarities in culture, I look at the African American culture, and I look at some of the Asian culture and some of the Caribbean culture and some of the African culture, where we actually believe of bringing up a family as community responsibility. Now, I'm sorry, I can't talk about the European culture because I know nothing about it. So we look at that, our families, as it's a responsibility of the whole community, which means that when I come home from school, that my neighbor can say, come into this house, nobody's in your house, and have lunch here until your mother gets back. And my only response is, yes, Mom. Thank you, Mom. Not, well, my mother's going to get home at 6, and I'll stay here until then. Because we believe that whatever she says to me, it's like my mother is talking to me. And so those are similarities where we have seen 3 different continents. I mean, we have the Caribbean, we have the Africans, and we have the African American community in the United States, all believing that this community is all the same. And so we treat our elders pretty much the same way, that our elders deserve the utmost respect. And I think you also would see that probably much, in the Asian community. Now, of course, after African Americans have been in the United States for so long, we now kind of adapted the culture. Let's just drop them all in a nursing home, which is where we struggle. I think we're still struggling with that. We're still struggling, which shows you how being in a particular environment can influence your culture. And so who you are can sometimes be adjusted and tweaked simply because you dropped yourself into another environment. And so now you start to absorb that culture, which I would say is great, which we call in New York our great melting pot. Because we have so many cultures, people from so many different people in the world, we can't really say what belongs to us. And that's why we all eat pizza as if it was our natural food, because we don't even realize it wasn't ours. It doesn't belong to us. So that's what I would kind of look at, the differences. I learned so much from culture, I would say, which I didn't, my husband being a Nigerian for almost 25 years, about how to treat my parents. Because in my household, I'm the youngest. But now that I'm 18, my sisters and I are equals. So if I think something and I have a great idea, I say it. If they don't agree, that's their problem. Which my husband calls, I am so rude. That the way I talk to my sisters is so disrespectful. And I'm like, why? I have a brain, they have a brain. My brain is probably more superior. So therefore. But where he, as a 50-year-old man, still defers to his sisters in so many situations. And I'm thinking, they don't even know what you're talking about and you're asking their opinion. Why? Just make your move. Which is, where cultures can sometimes conflict. So I want us to do a little experiment and kind of see where we in this room are similar in culture and also different in culture. So before I do that, I want us to kind of identify where we're from, and then we're going to kind of see where we're similar in culture and different in culture. So let's start here. Your name and where you're from.
I'm Ruchi and I'm from Delhi, India.
Okay.
My name is Star Essence and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm Elina Liehu, I'm from Helsinki, Finland.
I'm Olu, I'm from Nigeria.
Yetunde from Nigeria.
Naomi from Nigeria.
The Colombian from Finland, Helsinki. Georgia from Jamaica.
All right, well, this is really going to be fun. We have some Europeans, some Africans, some Asians. Are you Asian? Because I heard now that India was its own continent.
Yeah.
Which I was a real- Yeah, I was like, wow, I didn't learn that in geography. But it was, all right, so everybody's going to stand up. So I'm going to give a question, and it'll be easier if we can, if we all came up here, it'll be like a lot easier. And we're going to manage this tiny space, but it's just a few of us. I'm going to move this. Is that okay? Am I messing up your video? Well, see, if he was here, he could follow us. That's his punishment for not staying at home. All right, so everybody's going to come on this side. Yeah? So I'm going to ask a question, and if you agree with that question, you stay here. And if you disagree with that question, then you would go over here. Yeah? So I'm going to ask the question, and then you say the question, stay here. Okay.
So agree or disagree?
If you agree, you stay here. And if you disagree, you stay here. Okay, so here you are. You are married 10 years, and your marriage is not going well. Culture says you make your bed and you lie in it. Agree?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So you're married, you've been married for 10 years. Culture says you make your bed, you've made your bed, you have made your bed, so now lie in it. Does that make?
Yeah.
So if you agree with, if that's what your culture says, you're here. If your culture disagrees, you're over here.
My belief or my culture?
Your
Yes.
culture.
Okay.
Your culture says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Organization has.
Yeah, you can respond. Okay, wait, we're going to respond. So we're going to respond. So culture says you made your bed, now lie in it. Your culture says, hey, mistakes happen, keep it moving. All right? That's disagree. That's on this side. All right. All right, so agree and disagree. This is very interesting because we have people from almost the same culture. Now I'm going to find and explore. All right, so go ahead. All right, so Yetunde's going to go first.
I'm saying
You stay with your spouse when it's not going well.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I'm saying Cecilia, who is like an elder in our country, and we're from the same particular culture in Yoruba. But what I do think is that if you look at our history back in the days, yes, it's actually a disagree because Yoruba culture is such that you don't even bear your husband's name. But because of the modernization of Christianity, and there's something about when you agree to one God, it's something that does to your psyche. And so we don't even remember our tradition and our culture anymore. And what we remember is what religion has done to us. Hence why most of us, if this question is asked, will be on this other side. But in reality, this should be the side. Because in Yoruba culture, women are they're liberated. You're not even allowed to answer your husband's. No, that you're not allowed. It's actually not part of the culture to answer your husband. That's why I'm on this side. Because in recent, I've been looking back into culture. Because in the past, I won't do anything that's against religion. But now I'm going back into what did he say back in the days. So that's what I get.
All right. Anyone from this right, so explain how your culture refers to.
For me, this is now not personal to me, but I know that the first thing the family will do is come together and try to understand why. Because they really do not ever want you to grow. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Look at that. So look at this. But I was supposed to look at this now. So we have. Well, now this is kind of to my point earlier. So we have Caribbean, African, African Americans on this side.
Also Indian.
Okay.
Oh,
wait.
But do you know why you're there? I
The
still
side
don't
shows
know.
you, so I'm
Indian.
The side shows you. So the question is, the question was that your culture says, like in marriage, you made your bed, so now lie in it. And so if you agree with that statement, you're on this side. If you disagree, if your culture, not you personally, but your culture agrees with that statement, you're on this side. If your culture disagrees with that statement, you're on this side. So you're all right. So we have two Indians on different sides. So tell us why you say that culture says, if you know, that you can move out of this marriage. It's okay, keep it moving. And your culture, as an Indian, also says no, you need to stay in it.
Well, I can say from an Indian perspective. Yeah, so from both of us can actually speak all because in traditional Indian culture, we are not really liberated. We feel as goddesses. So I think wherever I feel like, when it's justified for my dharma, my eternal, heart, it says it's right and it's right, and nobody can stop me. Society is going to support me through that. So it's like total liberation of the human being was considered most sacred. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not talking about the modern culture. It's basically new culture. It's still sort of just staying in the transitional period. We're trying to get a new culture now. But I'm talking about traditional now. So
I can speak from both perspectives. One is the mythology of Indian culture, where we have seen even the goddesses like Sita and these women absolutely devoted to their families and their husband, but then after a certain threshold, they did choose to leave them. Of course, the concept of divorce did not exist then, so leaving them and living alone, separation was as good as that. If things are not working out and you have a fundamental difference, then yes, you don't really have to live in the same house. That's one. And secondly, from my own personal experience also, I got married when I was very young. I was 22, 23 when I got married, and it was a marriage of acquaintance. And I realized there is a term called that. It's not love and arranged, but there is a middle way, which is a marriage of acquaintance. And after 2 years of giving everything, even choosing to evolve and become whatever the person wanted, I realized that it's actually never going to be enough. And the only thing that happens eventually is you're going to lose yourself. So losing yourself, and there is nothing that is worth losing yourself. Because after some time, the person who loved you will also start disassociating with you because you're no longer that person. Right? So if you're not that person that person chose, so what is it that you're leaving? When you're not that same person anymore. So going a little bit into the philosophical side of things, that you're not even that person anymore who's leaving, right?
So let's hear from this side. So why do you feel that culture says, yes, you made your bed, it's now lie in it?
So, in India, if you go back in time, so traditionally, there's always been, most marriages are arranged marriages as part of the culture. You're introduced to, and that's because it's not just India, but it's globally. So humans have always formed tribes, and they've tried to find, people within their own community to, again, further the community. That was the sort of whole logic of building tribes and growing communities and things like that. That has always been the part in India. So that's one of the reasons why people used to always find love after. Love was never come before. It's like that your union happens, and then you discover yourself into each other, and then you sort of go forward and find love eventually. Said so. If I look at the modern times, the concept of family has changed quite a lot even in India. So for example, I come from the eastern part of the country. I'm born and brought up in Calcutta, a region called West Bengal. have been away from my parents for a long time. I'm single, still not married, but from that perspective, I can only tell from my sort of parents' perspective. What I've seen is that, so my father had a government job in the railways and we had to move a lot when we were a young family. So my mother would always, be more proactive in sort of setting up, houses in different
So do you think that
ways.
she wanted to leave at any particular point, and then
So
culture just told her that she was unable to get out of that relationship because she
Well,
was in it?
so if I look at it from my mother's perspective, well, there were arguments. A lot of
So they were
times.
married.
Yeah.
That's just the natural part of marriage. They were really married. That was a relationship.
So I've never seen sort of any reason for her to sort of move out. She was like, they're still happily married. As they
Yeah.
say. So from that perspective, I would say that it has worked really well. So, and there are many cases like that. But as I said, that the sort of definition of family is changing slightly in the context of modern Indians. So I don't know what will happen with me.
Okay. All right. Is our time up?
I want someone back for a good photograph.
Yeah.
Say the photograph.
Good.
Is our time up?
The photographer is here, so she wants me
Oh,
to be your photograph.
Okay. All right. So let's we have one. All right. Then we'll take another question. All right. Photographer, do your thing. Okay. Our European friends and our Caribbean friends.
Yeah, you have to do it.
All right, here.
How to do it.
Huh? What'd you say?
I think she was saying that again he's a desert. He's just enjoying it.
And then,
Opposing two Indian women.
All right, so-
Never get a chance otherwise.
Oh, that's why you're not married.
okay. Okay, so go ahead. So who wants to kind of talk about how do you grow up eating knife and fork, or just fork and knife, or hands, or what?
So when I was brought up, of course I'm from Detroit, Michigan, which is in the U.S. We only were taught to use maybe a fork and knife if, depending on the meal itself. Now culturally, it's okay to eat with your hands where I'm from. So a lot of times, people may say, "Oh, Star, why are you cutting your meat with a fork and not using a knife?" Well, where I grew up, we can use our fork to cut our meat. We can use our knife if we wanted to. However, looking back on the African culture, you use your hands. So when I go to like an Ethiopian restaurant, I eat with my hands. So I'm not eating with a fork or a knife when I go to an Ethiopian restaurant. I'm eating directly with my hands, and it's okay. So that's why I'm on this side saying I disagree, because even growing up as a child, I didn't always use a fork or knife. I ate with my hands.
So how do you eat?
Always knife and fork. It's taught from very, very early. That's the decent way, the nice way. We even teach how to hold them, so that it does.
At school, you have,
And at home.
because we have a free lunch at school, so we have warm meals at school, and it's part of the education actually that you learn how to use knife and fork. And in Finland we use them all the time eating, so it's a bit different than in America, for example. It's often used like you have a knife and fork and you cut them, but you eat only with the fork. But we use them together. And from the first grade, or even with the elementary school.
Now you're from the Caribbean, blending with European. So how did that?
Well, Jamaica is European based, so we were under the Queen's rule until 1951. So culturally, we eat rice and chicken, rice and meat with a knife and a fork. So we have pastries and things like that we'll eat with our hands. But when of course people break the rules and people eat whatever they want to, but the proper way of eating in Jamaica is with a knife, with your fork in your left hand and your knife in your right hand.
Yeah. So us having two cultures in our house, my children, I taught them from very early to use your knife and fork, which is not American culture. Our fork is, we just move it all through the whole table.
Yeah.
And that's how they ate until they got to America and they saw their friends and they're like, hey, this fork can actually cut food. All right, so let me give you another question. This is a children's question. So let me go to the side. Did anyone else want to add anything?
Okay, so for me in Nigeria, I grew up really with eating rice with a spoon. It was
Wow.
very normal. I think it was when I grew up and started getting into circles, I realized that there could be a fork and knife thing. I need to learn it. So when I'm in public, people are not wondering. But even right here, there's sometimes I'm just like, especially since there's no like proper table setting, I would start with the fork and then I'm like, find a corner, use a spoon. So I'm just like, but I grew up with a spoon for rice, and that's normal. And then we have traditional meals where it's your hand. And you just wash it and get down and get down.
Can I just start right there? Is, what I'm getting is that all of us are part of our culture and Finland, right? So even though I'm in India, I was brought up amongst like 20 different nationalities, and from a young age, I could see that everyone was eating very differently. And at home, we used to eat it with hands only. So I think I concluded it very early that it's different situations, and everything is okay. Like there's no such rule as to what is right and what is wrong with respect to the eating and even the etiquettes. There's no such standard etiquette rules here. But yeah, what will be wrong is that if you eat the right, if you're eating certain food in a wrong manner, so there's a mismatch that can happen. There's no wrong and right.
So just to share one of my personal.
I mean, I just say this. I mean, as Indians, we are totally passionate about our food. We want nothing to get in the way of our food. So there's nothing to do with like spoons, any cutlery. We just eat our food. We totally love it, enjoy it.
So all those forks and knives downstairs is for the rest of us.
There's so many people who I know who go out to trainings and seminars. They eat with forks and knives and spoons over there, but then they come back home and I really need to enjoy my food.
So the real taste
So like Naomi, in the corner. My spoon, the spoon is so small.
I just had a funny story. So I grew up in Calcutta. So Calcutta used to be sort of the British capital. So a lot of Anglo-Indian influences there. But my neighborhood was basically the Chinatown in Calcutta. So I have a lot of Chinese friends whose home I would go at. So I would sort of learn using chopsticks at a much younger age before I learned to use properly how to use a fork and knife. So now I call it the rare rice skill. I can eat rice with a chopstick. So.
Are we done?
No, she said you can continue.
Oh, okay.
All right. 10 minutes. All right. Okay, so I lost my question. All right.
Children.
Yes, children. Okay. So, in your culture, it determines that children belong to the husband and wife, or the mother and father. Let's just say that. Children belong to the mother and father. All right, come quickly.
We're going to miss again.
Don't worry, you didn't miss. Come and stand on this side.
So,
You can drop.
can we catch up?
Yes.
Someone else will give it a chance.
Okay. Drop your back.
Okay.
All right. So we're answering questions, and we're exploring the difference and the similarities during culture, and we're looking at the fact that we have Nigerians, we have Africans here, we have Europeans, we have Caribbeans, we have Americans, and we're looking at how and Asians. So I think we have almost every continent except for Latin America. Yeah, we have almost every continent. Okay, and so we're looking at our similarities and our differences as cultures. And we're also finding that even within our own, not even continent, but even within our own countries, within even our own tribes and regions, that there's still some differences that culture has made. So the next question is about children, and of course I forgot again. So in this question, I started it off. Okay, so in your culture, so this is what culture dictates, not necessarily what you believe. And what culture dictates is that the mother is the owner of those children and full responsibility. You agree. And if your culture dictates differently, you disagree. So disagree is over here, agree is over here. So the mother is sole responsible. When I say sole responsible, the mother is responsible for raising the children, everything, anything that has to happen in that child's life is the mother's responsibility. Agree. And if it's the couple's responsibility, or if you just totally disagree, then it's over here. All right, agree?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's a mix.
Culture, not what you believe today.
Yes, culture. Yes.
Okay.
Culture.
All right.
Okay.
pick a side.
Exactly.
First you pick a side. Didn't we discuss? Is this your side? No, you can't stand like this.
Only she can.
All right. So this is our side of no, that's not disagree. And this is our side of agree. You're on the agree side. All right. So now we get to let me hear. Okay. So let's hear. So we also like to look at the differences. So here we have Europeans and Asians. And we have, I think you just like this side.
Yeah.
Because he never leaves this side of the room. Even when his people come to this side. All right. Okay. So, go ahead. Who wants? Okay. You can start off by talking.
Well, I think, it depends. Because when the child is at a particular age, responsibility is the mother's. It's accepted.
And then you're on that side.
Then, but when the child is at a particular age, it becomes the father's responsibility. And typically, in my part, in Nigeria in particular, when a child is great, it's the father's child. When a child is bad, it's the mother's child.
Oh, yes.
So it changes, they say that's the mother's child. So in terms of ownership, for the fact that you bear your father's name, when you're born, it's your father's name that you bear. So you're in that family.
Yes.
Except to get married.
Okay.
So responsibility shifted, depends on what time.
So
Okay.
actually that's the same case in India as well. So all the fault, anything is fault that's mother's, and the fact that she is solely responsible for raising the child.
So the daily responsibility belongs. Let me rephrase it. The daily responsibility belongs to who?
The mother.
The daily responsibility belongs to who?
To the grown-up who is there available.
Okay.
That's clear.
Yeah. So let's hear that.
This is what I think. I even think that in the welfare state, as we have built it in Scandinavia, the child belongs to the society, to the government.
So let's hear.
It's the government's responsibility to give the education, the healthcare, the daycare, and then the parents are just it's not only a good thing.
But
that's
but that's why I did say to the grown-up who is available. But that's
teacher.
So the state is grown up?
But for example, I have a now 8-year-old, and I went to do some shopping and left him together with his dad together when he was 4 days old, and I found it totally okay. So
yeah, I took my 4-day-old to the supermarket with me.
Yeah, I didn't take him. No, the thing is, I didn't take him because I needed to do something that would be complicated if he would be with me. And there wasn't even discussion, will I leave him or not.
At homes it's totally equal, like even the fathers are they are.
Of course there is differences in families, but let's say as
Okay.
Largely, like you said, even within countries, there are still differences.
Yes.
There are still differences. In Nigeria, in most families, when a man has to do some of those things, it's like you're doing the woman a favor.
I watch kids for you.
Even when both partners are working, it seems like you still have to, like your work is complementing your major work as a mother.
Your real work.
Yeah, your real work.
Just to put your own into map, so Finland probably together with Norway, Holland, Sweden, Iceland are the leading countries in gender equality. So we come from that kind of so it's, and the Finnish women fought for 100 years for the equal rights and for all that. So
it was still a long fight. How did you get there?
I think
that also, but there is other things. First of all, we were first country that women kept the voting on the parliament. But even that time, that was in 1911, I think, something around that. But even that time, we still didn't have the voting on a communal vote. That came after, which there was actually after. The power was still very much in the communities and the city voting. But one thing is that in Finland there was a severe wars during the 1930s and 1940s. And as we are a small country, what happened was that the women stayed at home when basically all the men capable were in a war. And women took the role to do everything, to run the country, to run the factories, run the agriculture, do all the men's job. And of course the situation has been very same in US and all the other countries at that time having the wars. But as we are so small country, for us it was much more total. And of course for us being a 5 million at that time, maybe 3.5 million, and opposing a Soviet Union, a bit different numbers. So it was very, very different situation, and those has been the time kind of when it has been turned right.
So maybe we should kill our men.
All right, final question. Final question. The final question is a business. Yeah, the final question is a business question. So this is a business question. Is it culturally appropriate in your environment for an older person for a younger person to be the boss of a young? Okay, I'm gonna scratch that question since this is a women's meeting. Is it culturally appropriate for a woman to be the boss of a man? So in an organization, in a business setting, will management, leadership, decision makers take a second thought because culture is concerned that a woman would now be the boss, the manager, the supervisor of someone who is a male? So that wasn't a yes or no question.
It is.
Okay, was it? Thank you. Thank you very much. So agree is on this side. Disagree is on this side. So it says. So on this side says my culture will think. They will actually think about it and consider her gender before they put her over a man, right? Or our culture would say the best qualified, right?
It's all about money, let me tell you that. It's like purely about money.
Wait, take a decision first, then we take it. All right, so where are you? All right, so on this side says that decision makers will consider culture. I'm sorry, decision makers will consider gender when making a decision on that promotion, promoting a woman over a man. On this side says it's strictly qualifications, education, and experience. That's what they're looking at. All right. So decision, qualifications, education, and experience is all they care about. On this side, they will look at the agenda. They will look at the agenda. All right. Where are you? You're sitting down.
And with money. They look at money.
No. And no. Pick a side first.
They don't look at money and they don't look at gender. You're on this side.
If you're looking at gender, if you take a look at the gender, then you're on this side. If gender has nothing to do with it, you're on this side.
They should be on that side because say money is what's important, not gender.
All right. Well, I think we've heard such great. We see why Finland is on this side. And we see that we have a long way to go.
A little comment.
Yes.
The whole system and the infrastructure and the law and everything is built for this. But of course, not all the males quite yet cognize it.
Okay.
So there is still kind of a
and I would say
and also saying like it looks like this, but we have about 170 listed companies in Finland. There is very common male name Timo. There is still more Timos in CEOs on those listed companies than there is women. There is 9 women as CEOs on those listed companies.
Wow,
so even though this is like how it seems and how it should be, but you kind of change your question in a way.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You made it very, very strict. You made it very strict. There's no difference when you you started the question that
they would take a peek at it.
Yeah, because like how I interpret it, like I have hired for my team, I was the managing director, for my team a male who was 10 years older than I am and partly more experienced than I am, and we were both okay about it. Mm-hmm. But we discussed about it. We discussed about it out loud because I wanted to be sure that when he starts to work on my team, he knows that I'm the one who's making the decision.
Which means that culture would be a consideration. You had to even have that discussion. You would have not had that discussion if it was a woman.
I knew him before.
No, but
I would have. No, I might have if there would be a 10 years older female as well.
Okay.
I would have had that discussion as well.
Okay.
Because
age.
Because of age. Because
okay.
like
so age
experience and so on.
So we don't want her to ring the bell, but I want to. I just want us to kind of think about. You know, a lot of times that, as we can see, there's so many similarities and there's so many differences. I mean, because we were going back and forth. And so culture is just, for me, I love. When I travel, the most exciting part for me is to deep down into the culture of the place that I'm going to. You know, the buildings are nice and all that stuff, but to meet the people. And I think this forum here, the Women Economic Forum, gives all of us such an amazing opportunity to make friends, to build relationships, and really explore the culture of each other, and really break down some of the stereotypes that we've been hearing and the barriers. And so the rest of our whatever we have left that one day, we should really go and seek out that person from some culture that we've never had an opportunity to have a contact with, and just have a coffee or tea or whatever else you can find around, and just get to, just ask, some of those really questions of, is it really true that all of you have arranged marriages, is it really true that, that now that you guys are really having, we saw earlier that, that there's a law that CEOs, that 20% of the boards have to have, okay, that 20% of the board has to be women, just us to find out about each other, because it's a good time.
No, thank you.